So we're going to start with strictly competitive analysis. Now, I always like to say that when you're thinking about competitive analysis, it really comes down to like analyzing the problem. So how real is the problem? How big is the problem? What problem are you actually solving? And does the solution actually solve the problem? Assuming that you can answer those questions, these areas of analysis will help to provide some quantitative data behind those answers. So let's look at a competition analysis at its core. One of the things that we oftentimes find ourselves doing at CO is something that's so basic and so unbelievably necessary in those first steps of really analyzing your market and validating your idea. And that's called a competitive matrix. So for those of you that have never done a competitive matrix before, the good news is that we're going to have some awesome content that you can download at the end of this episode that will more clearly define how one is created. But I'm going to give you a very basic drawing so that you can kind of see what it looks like on paper. So a competitive analysis is quite simple. It's basically just a small graph. Kind of looks something like that, right? And on this left side column of the graph, very easy. You list the various features that your product has or that you think your product might have. So I like to always think more general instead of like super finite specific details. Typically entrepreneurs come to me and they say, hey, I've got this product idea and I've got 5 features. Awesome. Okay, cool. Before we even think about pivot analysis or expanding to new features, let's just look at the core components of what you've got. Next step, like Guillaume said, and I find that so many entrepreneurs miss this core component, which is let's actually go to Google. Like, let's Google our idea. So again, let's use a nice example here. We had been using toothbrushes, but we'll bring it up into 2018. And let's talk about Uber, for example. So when Uber first came out, they knew at their core what they did is they allowed for ride sharing. Like that was their feature. They had a bunch of other cool features that they could have added to the features list on their competitor matrix, but at the core, they were a ride sharing app. So if you wanted to find who your key potential competitors in that market were, all you'd have to do is, if you're assuming that you're Uber, is you go to Google and you type in ride sharing technology. As easy as that. After typing that in, the next thing you're going to find is that Google is going to populate a bunch of results of companies that might be trying to do the same thing, might be thinking about doing the same thing, or might be doing something similar. As Guillaume mentioned, there's really 2 different types of competitors. You have direct competitors. Direct competitors are the companies that are literally competing 100% in the same market, same space, same features, the whole 9 yards. And then you have your indirect competitors who may not be necessarily doing the exact same thing. For example, like a taxi would be an indirect competitor to Uber because it's not necessarily a ride-sharing app, but it allows you to accomplish the same purpose of Uber. Therefore, it becomes a competitor. So you have 2 different types of competitors. And then the way that the competitive matrix breaks down, as I sort of indicated here, is on this left side of your graph, you're listing your features, and on this upper sort of initial level of your graph, the first row, you're going to list 5 competitors. And I always like to say is you want to differentiate the types of competitors you're listing. So you're listing your direct competitors, you're listing your indirect competitors, and then, excuse me, most importantly, you're not only listing the biggest competitors in the game. One of the things we're going to talk about in a moment is this idea of your TAM, SAM, SOM and breaking down your market into different various sizes. Well, each area of your market is going to have different competitors. You're going to have local competitors. You're going to have state competitors. You're going to have national competitors. You're going to have international competitors. So when you're putting the ideas or you're putting the names of your competition onto a competitive matrix, the most important thing to keep in mind is that you want to not only list the big players, the multi-billion-dollar players, but you also want to list the competition that you realistically think you can really compete against in the first 6 months. Therefore,